Hello to all the following on Canadian Real Estate Channel and of course our Ontario Landlords Watch members. My name is Kayla Andrade. I'm a co-host here on the Canadian Real Estate Channel and tonight I brought you a BC landlord. And you're probably wondering why, but she's obviously, I found her on TikTok. She's been very outspoken and very powerful speaker to be able to identify what's happening in BC because it's very, very similar to what's happening here in Ontario. So if you're liking what you're seeing in the channel, please hit subscribe, share it with your friends and family, and you'll be able to check out our channel, Ontario Landlords Watch on YouTube as well. So make sure you hit the like button and give a comment. Are you in the same position that Sashi is in, as well as the Ontario Landlords? We want to hear your thoughts regarding the justice system when it comes down to the Ontario Landlords and also the BC Landlords. So without further ado, let's welcome our guest.
Hello.
Hey,
Hi.
On a media where you can be sitting there watching a TikTok and I'm just liking this girl's videos like crazy. And I love how she comes back with a video with someone's comments. And I'm like, and it doesn't matter where she is, she's there to like say it like it is.
Yeah, it's actually what got me to TikTok was that none of the media here in BC wanted to hear my story. Like I had been going through this nightmare with a nightmare tenant for the last 2.5 months and posting in landlords, BC landlords groups and so forth. And pretty much everyone's like, I'm getting so many comments. The media needs to hear this, take this to the media. So finally I'm like, okay, I'm going to take it to the media. And I did up a little background on my story and put pictures together of my destroyed property, sent it out to CTV, Global, BCTV, all of the stations that I was recommended, McLaughlin on Your Side, a few others, and I didn't get a single response. So then I shared back in the Facebook groups of landlords. Guess what, guys? Took your advice, went to media. Nobody wants to hear my story. And then someone said, have you made a TikTok? Make a TikTok. I'm like, oh yeah, I have a TikTok channel. I'm going to do that. So I just did it spur of the moment. I was pretty passionate about stuff and just like in the moment. And I made the TikTok. It had just pretty much happened with my property and my husband was there restoring stuff and I needed to feel like I was doing something. So that's what I did. I shared about it and it's up to over 25,000 views, that one video. So there's a lot of people that want to hear the landlord story and the landlord side of things because they resonate.
This is where we get our news now, is on TikTok or YouTube in a way. We can't even have a newspaper link. So it's kind of a good thing they weren't quite listening to you. But here at the Canadian Real Estate Channel and Ontario Landlords Watch, we're definitely interested in hearing your story.
Oh, well, that's comforting. Thank you.
Before we jump into your situation, describe how you got into real estate investing.
Well, actually, I got into it fairly early in my 20s, actually. And my husband and I lived in his parents' basement and we bought our first investment home out in Surrey, which is a suburb to Vancouver. It's about, it's not a suburb anymore, it's a city, but it's like outside of Vancouver. And we bought our first home and we sold it way too early. We made like a little tiny bit of money and like, woohoo, let's sell. And right, I think we purchased for 200, sold for 230K. That would be worth well over 2 million today, that property. So yeah, that was
I've been there.
Yeah. So then after that, we bought our own home, like in our late 20s, and then we finished the basement suite and rented that out. So had been renting that now for 25 years in this house that we live, and it wasn't really until 2015 that. No, 2009 that I then purchased another condo in Squamish and went through some tough times because it was supposed to all spike because of the Olympics, but it didn't. It actually went down and then had to rent for way under market. But today that has done so well. And actually in 2015, purchased a couple more in Squamish. And then over the last couple years, purchased a couple of pre-sales, of which one was this nightmare story I'm about to divulge. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So now you had a pre-sale, so it's a brand new unit that this gentleman
Yes.
had moved
Yeah.
into. Okay. So walk us through the screening set. So he came, you posted your ad, he came to your rental unit. What was the story? What was the
Yeah, so it's a pre-sale. It finished last spring, so March of 2022. Pre-sale, townhome, beautiful townhome, polygon built up in Mission. So it's about an hour outside of Vancouver, and it completed. I rented it out to a gentleman that was doing a government worker looking after like respite care. So he had 2 young adults living with him. So rented it out, no problems. They were keeping the property great. It was clean, rent paid on time, no problems. So 6 months later, yeah, it was about September 2022. He messages me and says, I can't keep my lease. I need to move. Would you be okay with me re-renting it? I will find the tenant. I'll screen. I'll do everything. And in my mind, I'm thinking, it's an hour away. It's kind of out of sight, out of mind. I wasn't thinking about it. I'm like, yeah, sure. Like trying to be the nice, compassionate, make it work. And we were traveling, doing a lot of stuff, a lot of things going on with our business. And it was a busy time. And I was like, he was willing to take care of it. And I said, sure. Yeah. If you're willing to find the tenant, should be fine. Right. And then there's this little voice inside of me going,
no,
you should be a little bit more involved. Right. But then there is so many things happening that I'm like, oh, he's willing to take care of it. It's all good. Right. And there was a little voice, those last couple of months thinking I'm not involved enough in that property, but I also didn't want to be involved because it was, taken care of and stuff. And Squamish is actually closer for us. It's 45 minutes and it's a beautiful drive. So I don't mind going to Squamish. We have 3 properties there. Mission's a different story. It's all highway driving. There's nothing exciting really. I mean, once you get there, it's nice, but the drive out there is not that exciting. So, and honestly, I purchased this as a pre-sale not really thinking ahead that I wanted to be a landlord in Mission. But when the time came, it was a really hot market, both rental market and sales market. So I could have sold, but it wasn't a good tax year for me to sell because I had just left my corporate job and pulled out my pension in a lump sum. So I was in the highest. And if you know what that is in Canada, by the way, it's 52.5%. So there was no way I was going to add more income to that tax rate. So that's why I didn't sell, or I would have sold that property. So I kept it because it's like, it was a good deal when I purchased and, the rent was going to be great and I was going to be cash flowing. And so I'm like, oh, ideal situation. Let's, just rent it out. It was easy to rent. And so anyway, so he found these people. He sent me, he goes, I've checked their references. Here's the pay stubs. He owns a company. They're family of, they've got 2 little boys. She's pregnant. It all sounded fine. I thought, okay, family's going to be there. It's a family complex. There's great amenities and stuff. It'll be all good. And I saw the pay stubs. I didn't check everything myself like I normally do. Right. I just took his word that he was doing what he said he was doing. So the rent keeps coming in on time because he's subleased it. So for the next 5-6 months, everything to me feels the same because I'm getting the rent and everything on time. And then February rolls around and the lease was supposed to go till end of March, his original 1-year lease. But February comes and the rent is not there as usual, right? Mm-hmm. So a couple days and I reach out to the first tenant and I said, I didn't receive the rent. He said, oh, he's going to pay you directly. And I said, oh, okay, I haven't received it. And then I reached out to the subtenant directly and he said, oh, I'll get it. I'll send it to you. And he sent it to me on the 5th. And so this pattern continued that I was getting it late. There was 1 month in April where I got it on time, and then May comes around and it's very late. Where now I'm having to message every day, and each day it's like a different reason why he can't pay. And then around the 15th, it's like my wife's cousin's on life support. I'm like, this is starting to sound like kind of crazy now, right? Like all these different reasons. Yeah. And then there was one point at which he texted me like a picture of cash, like, and a picture of being out in the woods. And I'm like, this is just really weird. This is just really strange. Like, we've got to go and visit them, I said to my husband. So, and then
he texted you a picture of cash in the wilderness.
$100 brown bills. Like, yeah. So it was a picture of cash and then a picture of like trees, like he's like out in the wilderness. And I'm like, what is this? Like, you know, and so it was at the next day that we issued a 10-day eviction notice, like May 18th, because I was like totally like, these aren't normal people.
Okay, and so with a 10-day eviction notice, you give them a notice to move out in 10 days?
Yeah, so I had just before that, because I was thinking ahead, I got the form, the RTB 51, which is a form saying that you can serve by email, because I was already envisioning I didn't want to drive an hour.
You can serve your documents in BC by email for non-payment rent?
Yes, as long as you have a signed, you need a signed form by landlord and tenant. So I got this signed by the tenants before they knew I was mad at them. So I'm still playing along with their game as like, I can't pay because this reason, because that reason. But I was already on to the fact that there was something not right about them. Yeah. And so I got them to sign that RTB 51. And so they signed it. And then a few days later, I issued the 10-day notice by email. So wow.
Okay, then elected officials, if you're watching this, they were able to serve their non-payment by email. Okay, Ontario, get with the program, because we can do that consent by email, but you can't be issuing any eviction notices by email. It's only like 24-hour notices, rent increase. But yeah, we're handcuffed in here.
Oh wow! Oh.
Keep going.
Yes, yes.
That just boils my blood a little bit.
Oh yeah, in this day and age, it's 2023. We're on to AI. We're on to artificial intelligence. Email was like 20 years ago.
They just got rid of their fax line.
Oh my goodness. Okay, Canada. Yep. Chop chop. Email is a definite. So yeah, so after that, we scheduled an appointment, like an inspection, to go in there and visit them. So we served that 10-day notice on May 18th. On the 26th, we get the rent payment. So for May, so we couldn't evict. But on the 27th, the very next day, was when we went in and went through the property. Mm-hmm. So that's where we saw the mess. Like, just it was not damage. There was just like things nailed into the walls. And when I mentioned, oh my gosh, you guys nailed the nails right into the walls, like these, like the last time I saw this, it's like brand spanking new, and now there's like bang, like family pictures nailed into the walls. And so it was the reaction that really, like, it was just this hostile reaction, rather than, oh, I didn't know we weren't, you know, it wasn't a polite interaction at all. It was like this, well, of course, there are family photos. What do you expect? What are we supposed to do? It's our home, you know? And it was just the way they responded. It's not the kind of rapport I have with my other tenants. So right off the bat, there was like this tension, and you know, they were not comfortable really with us being in there, but you could tell that they wanted to just sign the new lease with us. And because we only have the other lease with the other tenant, they just wanted to get it signed and get us out. And because we had never really had any bad experience at that time, we just went through the lease. We had also prepared an addendum with all of the like liquidated damages clauses and, you know, all of our rules, and in there had like not nailing things to the walls and things like that. And so we went through all of that with them, and they're like, yeah, we agree to everything, signed.
You signed a new lease with them when they were already late on their rent, and now you've seen the typical minor damages, and you still signed a lease with them?
And you know what? I did it. And the minute we left because they were complaining about their neighbors spying on them and watching them and stuff like that. And the minute we left there, I was not feeling good about it. And we went to go talk to the neighbors. And that's when we found out that they had a criminal history and that somebody had posted their criminal records in the amenities room. And they had actually told us all this as well, that that he was on house arrest, that someone posted their criminal records in the amenities room. But they told us all that after we signed the lease.
Oh my God.
So we were like pretty taken aback, like with oh my gosh, like like what just happened here. But we really didn't like, it was when we went to go talk to the neighbors and realized, okay, they're normal. All these neighbors are just like regular everyday people, and they're just concerned for their safety because of the criminal background. But we didn't realize the extent of it because we hadn't looked him up or anything at that point, because the name he applied for was was different than the name on the ID, which I had taken a picture of when we got to their place. And I took a picture of the ID, went to talk to the other tenant. Then when I get home, I start Googling, and it's like extensive criminal, like, and I look him up on the court records online, and and then like that was the beginning of huge anxiety, like not sleeping, not like who's in our property and how do I get him out, and like going into Facebook groups trying to get some, like, what do I do now, because I've never even dealt with anybody like this, let alone a 20-year criminal that is involved in all kinds of shady stuff.
So you
So
signed a new lease with the criminal. Now,
yes.
how did was there more to the tenancy that made it go bad before you started the eviction process? Like, how did you get him? Did you evict him just based on his criminal record?
No, there was a number of things. So we did a 30-day notice for cause, and there was like identity, like applying under a different identity, because he was
What's 30 days for a cause?
it's so you can evict. There's a 30-day notice eviction, and then there's all these different tick boxes, like where you can tick. And so he had changed the locks too, which is illegal. And then, I mean, this is literally 3 days after signing a lease, I'm evicting him. Yeah. So, and now looking back, I can see how their backs got right up too, because they're just like, well, everything was fine. And then like now she's evicting us. But there were so many things that we had discovered in that time of being at the property and issuing that eviction notice 3 days later. Like, because I literally didn't have the right name to search on. So then when I got the right name, then it was like, oh my God. Right. So, but he like, yeah, we just did things in reverse. Like we should have been taking the ID and then going away and then coming back with the lease after. Right. But
tip number one, always put a stop in the concept of having the tenants sublet the unit. This is why landlords in Ontario, we can say no, but tenants can still apply to the board to have a hearing to figure out why their landlord would say no to an actual a subletter.
And the way our tenancy agreement is written, it's written in favor of the tenants to be able to sublet. Like it actually says on there, no sublet will be unreasonably denied.
Wow, see, that part sucks.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, but in this case, like I would have had, if I knew who that person was, and even if I had met that person, I know I wouldn't have rented to them. Like if I had met them, if I had screened them myself, any of that, like it was a very
it could have been like a time back to talk to the current tenant to say, you know what, don't worry about your lease. I'll make sure that we make it a smooth transition. I'll find new tenants to go there. Just allow me to come in to see the unit whenever we have some showings, right? Like something.
And that's how I've done it with any other property, just that one, because he was so taking the initiative. That's why I kind of like, didn't do that. But typically I would be the one, in any time that my tenants have broken the lease, it's always been me that's replaced the tenant and no issue. Mm-hmm. So yeah, the issue
of the 30 days and also put the point where there was a fraudulent name that he did it.
Yep. So there was a few different reasons. and then also they didn't have tenants insurance, and that's a requirement. And after seeing how much stuff was in their place, like they literally had things piled up from the floor to the ceiling and no tenants insurance. So I'm like freaking out about like a fire in a strata, like, anything could have happened, right? Like just now knowing what I know about them, like they had removed the smoke detectors, all the light bulbs, like they were doing some pretty nasty things in there. So just the fact that they didn't burn the place down, like I'm just so blessed, they didn't have any tenants insurance or anything, right? So
now, did you go to a full hearing with this gentleman?
yeah. So what happened was we evicted for the 30 days, and then June 1st comes around, June 2nd, they don't pay the rent. I give them another 10-day notice. And another thing happened because the strata had been complaining about them, and we had formal complaints done from the strata to help us get an expedited hearing.
What was the complaints?
Noise complaints, there was noise complaints, and then also police coming to the property, and them not opening the door. So it's unreasonably bothering the neighbors around them. Like there's some strata rule, like actual legal stuff that they had attached to it, but it was yeah, I mean, the neighbor next door had complained several times about noise and illegal, like visitors throughout the night, like at odd hours. Yeah.
Any drug trafficking or anything going on there?
That was going on, but it wasn't in the complaints. Like it was alluding to that, but there was no like solid evidence of that. But now going through that place, that's definitely what was going on there. And police were even aware of it and everything, but nothing ever happened, right? Like the neighbors would call the police, they would come, and then nothing would happen. And the guy was on house arrest. Like he was wearing a monitoring device. So it's a breakdown of our entire system.
We're going to pat down our tenants now before we sign a lease with them. Are you wearing?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because like clearly the police were not empowered to do anything about that situation. And like he had a parole officer, and the parole, like, all of these things are happening. He's breaking curfew, which I found out later, like, by talking when the police came, when we did finally get our property back and I saw the condition, I called the police. And that's when I found out that they had been to the property many times, and he had broken curfew, just all kinds of things I found out about it. And it's like, okay, well, nothing was ever done, right? And he's still now just on the loose and probably going to go do this to someone else. So, yeah. So anyways, we did go through the hearing. We first got a standard hearing date for end of July. So
what's standard hearing date? Like
that's a residential tenancy branch, landlord tenant, like as just a hearing, because they disputed my 10-day notice. I actually did try to do a direct hearing, which you apply to get the possession right away without having them involved, without having tenants involved. And you're allowed to do that if they don't pay the rent. But if they just, yeah.
Oh my God. That's pretty sweet.
You guys don't have that.
Oh God, no.
No. Okay. But there is a whole, like one part of it that's really shitty, in that the tenant is allowed to dispute that notice even with no evidence that they paid the rent. Mm-hmm. So our tenant disputed that notice even though they didn't pay June rent. So that nullified the ability for me to do the direct hearing. So that's why I decided to apply for the expedited hearing. And the expedited hearing they will do if there's a threat to property or people around. And because I had the evidence from the strata that there was disruption, there was also a driving incident where she was going around the complex with a bat and screaming and shouting and speeding, and family almost got hit. So there was that. There was the threat. And then he had also been overheard in our garage which was filled with stuff that the neighbors believed at the time was stolen property. No vehicles in there, but just housewares. Like the way the neighbor described it is there was U-Haul after U-Haul coming and unloading things into their garage. So just really suspicious kind of stuff, right? So and so apparently he was overheard in the garage saying he was going to damage the property and steal everything. So he was overheard. So that and all the criminal records. So we submitted it into the tenancy branch as evidence to have an expedited hearing, and we qualified. So it moved. And we still kept our standard hearing date of July 28th, but we got an expedited hearing on the 7th of July. So this is beginning of June. So it was only 5 weeks, really. But that was really a long 5 weeks when you're going through something like that. Like it's a long.
I'm not even. I got a fiddle for you. we're looking at like 8 months for your first hearing, and if it's adjourned, they're waiting another 7 to 8 months for an adjourned hearing. So yeah, we're just like, oh, like even
wow.
to see how they're playing out, because that's the key here is knowing the justice system of being able to say, okay, like here is my hearing, I still have my hearing, but I've also been able to apply for an expedited hearing for a quicker date, right? So at least we can give props to BC on that in order to be able to address your concerns, especially for the safety of the other residents that were there.
Yes, exactly. But I actually was lucky to get that expedited hearing because I spoke to somebody at the residential tenancy branch, and he was a head arbitrator that had been with the branch for 20 years. And he said, it's people that are like, we get calls of tenants that are setting off pipe bombs and there's lighting fires in the property, and, they're threatening the landlords at gunpoint. And those are the kinds of things that get expedited hearings. So he was kind of trying to talk us out of it, but I went ahead and applied anyways, even after hearing that, because I was getting from him that you can try, but it's not likely you'll be able to do it. And the standard hearing was only like 8 weeks. So he said, like, that's pretty good. He goes, usually it's much longer than that. And today I've talked to landlords and the wait time is more like 4 months. So I think I just got in at a really good time when they had hired a whole bunch of people. So, but it's backed up again. So it's not quite that quick now. But yeah, it just, that whole, so the morning of the expedited hearing, the tenant actually contacted us by voicemail, and he left me a voicemail saying that he wanted to pay me the June and July rent in exchange for a mutual end to tenancy form filled out by both of us for the end of July. So I thought that was pretty good. He asked for an invoice that he could pay with a credit card from his company. He didn't want to do this by e-transfer. So my husband complied with that, gave him an invoice to pay. He paid it by a credit card. And then we went into the hearing, and he starts talking, telling the arbitrator, we don't need the hearing. We've already settled it. We've got a mutual end to tenancy for the end of July. And so the whole hour hearing, which they don't allow you to go past 60 minutes, was all focused on the settlement, how he was going to leave by end of July, how there was still an outstanding portion of rent that he was going to pay by the end of July. And so the arbitrator gave us an order of possession, a monetary order for the end of July. And we also negotiated being able to go in there to do showings, and they were going to keep the place tidy, and they agreed that we could get in there and do 4 showings. So all these things were agreed on in the arbitration. And then they didn't do anything. They didn't allow us into the property. Anytime I emailed them and asked them to be able to show it, I get back a half-page email of swearing and being called a slumlord and like, just stay away from us. You've done this. You've evicted us. It's destroyed our lives.
I love it because it's in the comments. It's like, yep, slumlords, you guys, burr, the price sky high. And I'm like, it's funny you said that, because I'm looking over. I'm like, anytime you hear landlord, you're just like slumlord. Like they don't even care. They don't even know.
Well, you turned my brand new property into a slum. So you literally did turn me into a slumlord.
Question to the tenants that will call a slumlord, or a landlord a slumlord. What do you call a tenant? that is not paying rent, damaging the place, ruining the enjoyment of the landlord and other tenants. Like, what do you call that? Like, normally we call it a professional tenant because they know how to work the system, but put in the comments what you actually call
That's
a
so
bad
kind to
tenant.
call them a professional tenant. I mean, it's such a kind word after being called a slumlord.
I know, because we're showing the standard of us. Like, we're always held at a higher standard, so we can't be calling them like slum tenants or like a deadbeat tenant. But this is where it's not even about the tenants and the landlords. Like, it comes down to that brainwashing of like bad landlords are bad, tenants are just wonderful, and not all landlords are rich and not all tenants are poor. So get that out of your head, because many people actually prefer to rent so they don't have to deal with the rising costs of owning a home or having to pay for their fridge, their stove, their furnace, their roof. It actually makes sense sometimes to rent. We just ask for that respect in order for us to be able to run a business. And if you don't want landlords, private landlords in the business, I'm sure the government's going to be able to help you out and provide you with affordable housing. Oh, wait, what's the wait time in BC for government housing? I know it's about 12 to 22 years here in Ontario. So who do you want, government or private? It's up to you. Get that out of there.
That's a good point. But yeah, I mean, the slumlord, I mean, I wasn't a slumlord until they turned that beautiful property into a slum. And then I became a true slumlord.
No, what that one tenant has done though is just stepped up your screening. It's you're not only learning how to better to protect yourself and screen the tenant, you're also now teaching other landlords how to do it. And for that, I admire you for it, because a lot of investors want to get into the game as a financial, safe nest, something for their retirement plan, because they don't have that the money there for their retirement. They don't have a pension. So it is for their long-term side of things, that we're not that type of flipper. But when you see tenants that are abusing the system, it's obviously just hurting the good tenants that are out there as well.
Absolutely. And for the government would so easily be able to help this whole situation by teaching people how to screen, by teaching the landlords, like, this is what you need to look for, do credit checks, be able to do criminal checks, but they don't. So what they say is you can't evict due to prior criminal records. So if you get somebody into your property that has a criminal record, you cannot evict them based on criminality, which I learned after the fact. And I couldn't believe it. I'm like, what kind of ridiculousness is that, right?
But in Toronto housing, they're actually trying to prevent people with a criminal record into Toronto housing. But I'm like, where are they going to go? In the private sector? Like, you think that we're social workers? Like, we're not equipped, sometimes to handle these situations.
Or where they're pushing the responsibility of the social housing onto property owners. Right?
You got it. The government failed. The government has failed across the board, across the country in providing affordable housing. They offload their responsibilities onto the private sector. And with rent control, especially in Ontario, it's now catching up with our economy. And that is what you're seeing today when we have a growing encampments. We have the shelters already overloaded. It's not even the winter time. We have sleeping pods with no washroom facilities in there in next to a city dump in Waterloo. These, instead of building duplexes and triplexes and sixplexes, they're just magnifying their social franchise of these shelter systems, putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound, and then saying, look at us, we're addressing the housing crisis. But instead, we're making it absolutely worse across the board.
Well, I mean, and this was my first experience with our court system. So what happened was he was supposed to be out by July 31st. He wasn't. So
after his mutual agreement to you.
After his mutual agreement to us, he didn't leave. He had a U-Haul parked there for the last week, and he was sending these pictures of a clean carpet to my husband to show, like, everything's like great over here. We got the U-Haul truck. We're cleaning the carpets. And so he's sending these images over to my husband. But the 31st comes and goes. We were actually went to Supreme Court. We had planned to go there to do a walkthrough with them and return their deposit and get it ready for our next tenant to move in on the 1st. But because he didn't leave, we ended up going to Supreme Court and exchanging our order of possession for a writ of possession, which then gives you permission to evict with court-ordered bailiffs. So we got lucky because we found a company that was able to go the very next day on the 1st. And we're like, okay, great. Like, we'll get them evicted. And then we can, and I set up got the bailiffs, set up the cleaning people, and then told my new tenants, you guys can get the key in the evening tomorrow. Because we were just trying to make it work for our new tenant because of that whole mutual end to tenancy, and they were all on board. I went ahead and re-rented it. We weren't even able to go in there and do showings because of the way that those tenants were behaving. But because I had pictures and videos, I was still able to re-rent and to new tenants. So then on that morning, on August 1st, we drive out the 1 hour to Mission. That 1 hour drive I didn't want to do. I sure have done on many, many times since. So we drive out there on August 1st. We're parked on the side. The bailiffs have already gotten there. Locksmith's already there. They've changed the locks. We can see the bailiffs are loading up his U-Haul truck. So basically he's getting free movers, right?
The bailiff loads the tenant up?
Yes. Yeah, that's what they did. I mean, what they could do, they could have done is taken everything to storage and stored it, and we would have paid storage costs. But the bailiff came over and told us, rather than you guys having to cover the storage, we'll just put everything into his truck and he can take it, right, and leave.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you got the order, then you had to go to the Supreme Court in order to get a writ and to take that information to the private bailiffs, where they come and they do the loading of the tenant's belongings?
Yeah. So typically what would have happened is if there was no U-Haul truck, they would have gone in there, taken everything out, put it in their own moving truck, put it into storage, and we would have had to pay the storage costs and the moving costs and the bailiff costs and everything. So
how long? Like what
for 30 days. 30 days
30
storage.
days. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Which would have been, ideal. But what ended up happening is while the bailiffs were there, they're loading up his stuff. He goes to the Supreme Court, goes in front of a judge, and comes back with a stay order. So the stay order has now granted him until to be heard in a half-day hearing with us on August 22nd. So he presented that to the bailiffs. So that stopped the eviction process. So they had already moved. Yeah.
So you were in the adjudicator system where you gave him the 10-day notice, but he was able to appeal that to have a hearing, right?
This isn't to do with the 10-day notice. This was
no. I'm just trying to analyze like the tribunal system court and then the actual Supreme Court, like having a stay there too, because he was able to make the tribunal a little bit longer, and now he was able to go to the Supreme Court to make
so
it.
If he had not done that mutual end to tenancy, that phone call to us, we would have gone into the expedited hearing and possibly gotten a 24 eviction. We don't know what would have happened because we didn't go through the process.
But you can get a 24 eviction.
You know what? I think you can, but I don't want to.
Any viewer, jump into the comments. Let us know.
Yeah, I'm not sure how it works, whether they give a 24-hour or a week or how they do it. But the point of the matter is he was able to get the stay order by just going in front of a Supreme Court judge. And what he told them is that he was under duress because he had to serve us with that document, that affidavit. So he went under oath and said that he was under duress when we did this mutual end to tenancy, which made no sense because I had a saved voicemail, all the text. Yeah. And the judge took him at face value and gave him a half day hearing on the 22nd. So the eviction gets stopped, right? And they give my $300 new locksmith, the key and everything back to the old tenant. And he gets to stay in there after we've just hired these expensive bailiffs. I had to cancel the cleaning lady and tell my tenants, like, it's not going to happen today. We've got to figure things out. And I had no idea what to do at that point. Like, we didn't really have a lawyer involved either. And the bailiffs weren't giving us, they weren't telling us these are just the bailiff guys that are there. So after the next day, I started like calling around, talking to the guy at the head guy at the bailiff company, start talking to lawyers. I figure out, what has to be done. But now it's coming up to a long weekend. So we basically spent the whole long weekend in August getting all prepared to go to court and request for the stay order to be put aside. And it's a whole process. You've got to go in front of a judge. You've got to take your evidence. And then the judge decides first of all, whether they're going to hear you in chambers that day. So we didn't even know if we'd get heard or not, but we're so lucky. I had to be a little assertive to get heard that day, but he did hear us. And then that judge allowed us to, he said, if you need to serve the other party, and then we'll hear you back here. This was on a Tuesday after a long weekend. He said we would hear you on Thursday, the 10th. This is the 8th of August that we had gone in, and he heard us on the 10th. He gave us permission to serve by email. And the reason being, as I said, the tenant is dangerous and has a 20-year criminal record. And again, I'd have to, yeah. So he allowed us to serve by email by midnight on that night on Tuesday. So we went through a hearing on the 10th with the tenant. And at the end of it, the judge, he came in with his wife, and she, put on quite the show and everything about being evicted and, the whole bit. And the judge really did sympathize with them and wanted to give them another 48 hours. And I'm like, no. But the judge gave them 24 hours to be out. And they used that 24 hours to appeal the decision and serve us with appeals papers. So we had to go to appeals court the next day in downtown Vancouver.
Beep. What?
Yeah.
Okay, it sounded like everything then was going nice. Like, I can serve by email. I got my tribunals date. Now this is just ridiculous.
Absolute ridiculousness, because I mean, we were in there with this much evidence. My binders are this thick, all tabbed. We literally became lawyers for those couple of weeks. And I've got 2 or 3 lawyers in our circle that were kind of giving us little bits of advice here and there and what to do, what paperwork to do. But, we've never done this. So my husband and I are just we're fighting with each other, this form, no, this form. It was just so stressful through those days. And then getting served to have to be in appeals court. It just felt never ending at that point. We had just done everything according to the system, throwing out money for the bailiffs, and then, getting it all shut down in front of us, and then having to go to court, and then appeals court. And then finally in appeals court, this is on a Friday, and we had to be in the hearing for 11. She listened to both, and he didn't even show up. He came on on screen, and we drove there, and we're in court with the female judge and so forth. So this is a 1-hour hearing. She adjourns the court until 3:00. And so she said that we could go home and then Zoom in as well for the decision. But we were trying to get bailiffs back on Friday, but we couldn't because we didn't know for sure. So we had to wait till 3 to get the decision. And it was then that she said, yeah, you don't that she's agreeing that stay order should be put to the side. And anything else that was still outstanding, she said, would be addressed on the 22nd, like the monetary order and the other stuff. So this is at 3:30, and the bailiff company's like, well, we have a spot on Monday, but you have to tell us right now whether you want it or not. And so we had to hire them again for Monday to go back there. And by the time they went there, these guys were gone, and they left all their disgusting mess behind. And the walls are all trashed, carpets trashed. Yeah. So
wow,
it was pretty nasty. So my husband basically took the whole week off. And that day that we went in there, that was August 14th on a Monday. And we hired junk removers, cleaning people, carpet cleaners. And then my husband was there, sleeping there with an air mattress, trying to restore the property, painting. He's pretty handy that way. So it helped a lot, but it was a long process, long and drawn out. Just when you think you got your property back, and then you're dealing with the restoration, right?
Now, all said and done, what was the cost of between damages, rent, legal fees?
probably like hard costs, hard like physical, here you go, about between 10 and 15. And then another probably 10 to 15 of just physical labor, you know, my husband's time and all of that stuff. And then the loss of from our business, that's probably another 10, 15K there. So, you know, it depends how you look at it, right? Like,
Down.
so, but it does because it was so involved, and you know we're self-representing ourselves, so dealing with the court system, and then dealing with all of the neighbor complaints, the strata complaints, dealing with the tenants themselves, and they're so emotionally abusive, and you're dealing with all of that while you're trying to, you know, do the other stuff, and so there it was just a lot, and just getting them out of the property, it's like this big weight off, even though you still have this mess to deal with. But just knowing they're out of there, it's like a big, huge relief.
So guys, this is a lesson learned. Like you said, like you didn't know this process of eviction until you actually were thrown in to say, now you got to do an eviction. Now you're learning that process, also doing that process and knowing what could potentially happen. Our landlords and our property managers for sure, like are in different woods, but always educate yourself on what it's like to manage the property, identify red flags. That's something that you should be looking out for based on the current tendencies in order to act on that and get very educated on what are all the methods that are available to you for an eviction based on non-payment of rent, ruining the enjoyment of others, damages, the criminal activity, safety issues. We have to get that education out there. And I'm glad that you were able to kind of highlight what our landlords are dealing with in BC and how they need to prepare for something similar to you, and also know that these individuals are out there. You need to step up your screening process, and in order to,
and I think there's a lot more of them out there, just based on the kind of reaction and response that I've been getting from landlords and that have been through this, and because they've decriminalized drugs, because the cost of housing, there's more and more people that are just using these tenancy laws to their full advantages. So, and just the fact that he was able to go in there to a Supreme Court and say, I'm under duress, I'm a tenant, I'm being evicted, and be given, they totally, he absolutely knew the system. So
he's done it before.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, non-payment rent guys, report that non-payment rent application to FrontLobby. The tenant's consent, no judgment is needed in order to report that debt to FrontLobby. They share it with Landlord Credit Bureau and Equifax on a monthly basis. So landlords can figure out, you know, what they're looking for when they're doing that initial credit check. Never take a credit check from a tenant. It definitely could be photoshopped and their pay stubs. You know, times are tough, and we know times are tough. We know that there's a housing shortage, but at the same time, in order for us to continue to keep providing housing, we need to have good tenants, because not too many people would be sticking around in this business if they had to deal what you had to deal with.
Oh my gosh, yeah. There's so many that that have reached out to me and said they've dealt with things similar and taken their property off the market. I think we're probably one of the few that have dealt with this and just kept going because there's been so many good ones that we've had, and just tried to see the forest for the trees, and just, you know, like I know people that have gone through this and kept going, like, and they're happy now. Like, it is a difficult thing to go through, but when you get through it, you can look back and be like, okay, it's in the past.
Yeah.
So,
and you're learning, and it's just going to make you stronger as a housing provider, educating the landlords. Definitely, guys, check her out on TikTok. She's always giving us updates based on the comments that are coming. So she's definitely someone to watch, because she's caught my eye from speaking up against this. And I'm glad that you resulted to TikTok, because I know media is very skewered into telling the tenant side of things. We just had CBC in Ontario saying, should Ontario renters strike? And it's like, thanks a lot, CBC. I'm like, like the landlord and tenant board is already not overloaded with non-payment of rent applications. And now you're convincing tenants who are technically, in affordable units now, telling them to rent strike just because they're not happy with an above the guideline rent increase that only some housing providers are applying for. They make it sound like it's so
What is the allowable rent increase in Ontario?
This year is 2.5.
For 2023 or 2024?
2024. We had 2.5s back to back. Before that was 1.2. We had a 0 the year before that. So
Okay. So we were
people,
2% in 2023, and they haven't announced 2024 yet.
What was it in last year or this year?
It was 2%.
2%. See, like, and then they wonder why, BC is the worst, Ontario is the worst. And like, maybe it's your rent controls. How about that? And now when tenants are leaving, we have to jack it up and try to predict where the numbers are going to lie. Like, are you going to increase the property taxes 10%? The utilities are going to go up. The hydro is going to go up. We have to, and how long is that tenant actually planning to stay in the unit? So we can't really adjust it. So we have to give it that big jump in order to kind of fulfill the needs to that property based on the tenants that are in there. So we really need to work at a different formula, something that is more fair and balanced, because our tenants with 2.5, you're like, oh, that's not a lot. I'm like,
no. Yeah. And I mean, if you just leave it up to the market, supply and demand, that's generally how prices are set for anything, right? If there's more demand for something and there's less supply, then prices will go up. And right now, the housing supply is declining and the demand is increasing because there's more people coming to Canada. There's more immigration. There's builders are not building right now. There's like 22% of builders that put their projects on hold because of the interest rates. So there is way less supply. And where the government needs to focus is make new supply, build new properties.
And that's what Ontario did. They said any new builds after November of 2018, it's not underneath rent control. And so, yes, that kind of makes sense. But at the same time, now we have the no rent controls, the rent control units. They're trying to get the numbers up, or they're trying to demolish the entire building to rebuild brand new. Because if it's a new rental unit, so in Ontario, they're really turning good landlords bad. And that's the sad part of the reality of what's happening, is that you've taken some really good people and you're creating this environment for them that either they got to be shady with what's going on, or they're going to be selling the property. The new owners are moving into it, or their family members. And now that investor has skipped out into another country and putting their money where it makes sense. Right?
Yeah. It's landlords and it's builders too that are like, okay, well, if Canada wants to tax me, I'll just go build in the US, or I'll build somewhere else and where it's more profitable for me. So if they are taking that away, there is some larger scheme or some larger plan, because they're clearly not making it. If you think about like smoking, for example, they tax the cigarettes, and they are benefiting from the smoking. So if they're taxing the builders, like taxing, they're the ones benefiting. The government is benefiting, but the builder isn't. So they're going to leave.
Talk about the benefiting the colleges and the universities with 40% enrollment fees being international students. They're paying a higher dollar value to go to school in Canada. They're benefiting off of the profits. And on their website, it clearly states that it's cheaper to live off campus. And it's like, but you know what? They talk to the colleges and the universities, and they say that they've hired someone to help these international students find permanent residence outside of the campus. And it's like, we're done. Like, there's no properties. Like, what's wrong with you? Like, but where's they got the profits, they got billions. How come we're not making our colleges and our universities responsible for providing some shelter? But again, a lot of our back and forth with, tenant activists and of course the landlords, they always get that concept of housing as a human right. I think we have to identify, is that housing a human right, or is shelter a human right, and whose responsibility is it? Because it's certainly not the private sector in order to do it. It's up to your government. But the government wants the tenants to feel like it's the greedy landlords trying to charge X amount of rent to keep that hostility going. But are they planning to destroy all small landlords across the country? What do you think, guys? Put it in the comments. I want to thank everyone for watching. We're almost to that hour mark here. Sashi, what is the number one tip you can give the viewers tonight? What kind of advice can you give them through what you've experienced?
Screen, and try to see how your prospective tenant is currently living. If you can, do a Zoom call with them in their current residence and see what they're all about. You can't screen too much. Get to know them.
Pull your own credit check, guys. FrontLobby.com also has credit checks for $9.99. It's not crazy. Verify yourself as a landlord, a property owner. Pull your own Equifax credit report. Look at those trade lines. Don't just look at the number in the score as well, and reach out to your different landlord communities, groups on Facebook, or your municipal landlord associations. Come together as a community, because we're going to be stronger together. I want to thank you all for watching. Sashi, I want to thank you for sharing your story, and please share her story of what she's going on, because she's a housing provider. She's providing something that we desperately need in Canada, and that she shouldn't be treated as such. And she should be able to give, she deserves access to justice in a timely manner. And she demands her property rights back. We need our property rights. They're taking it away. So if you're liking the video, hit subscribe. Also check out the Ontario Landlords Watch YouTube channel. That's where you'll find more videos similar to what we're doing here for the Ontario market. We also have a conference coming up in Cambridge on October 28th, teaching you everything you need to know to pivot through these challenging times and prepare you to be fully educated, so you know what to do if you have a situation like our friend here. So I want to thank you all again for watching, and hit that subscribe button. Have a great night, guys.
Thanks, Kayla.
You're welcome.